one of my favorite philosophers of the 20th century is a British philosopher called William David Ross. And he's associated with the intuitionist school in ethics. And he was saying that the method of ethics is different from the methods of science. And we shouldn't, for instance, try to make ethics into a natural science, because ethics, in a way, starts from many of our moral beliefs. There is plenty of room for revision, but we shouldn't entirely dismiss them. Now, to be fair, Rawls does admit this to a point with his method of reflective equilibrium, when he tries to say that we should somehow bring together and try to form a coherent set of beliefs between our general moral principles and our considered judgments, but that's too abstract. It always boils down to what are our considered judgments. And I think that Rawls does not pay close attention to it. And someone like Alasdair MacIntyre was saying the same thing, that if we look again at what constitutes the good life, we will see that it involves relations of partiality, such as being a family member, or being a friend, or being someone's neighbor. So all these relations, they give reasons that are reasons of partiality. Mm-hmm. And I would say that I think that it's common sense to say that each person values their own kids more than the kids of strangers. It doesn't, and that's the issue. It doesn't mean that you don't have to value other people. It means that you value your people more. And this is something that is really well captured by William David Ross, because
I've never read him. I don't know him.
He's a brilliant philosopher, and he gives us the tools to have a much more sophisticated understanding of where we stand on particular issues. So just to anticipate a bit something, if he were alive today, he could say, for instance, that there is a difference between obligations and obligations to an extent, or pro tanto, or prima facie obligations. So he could say there are all sorts of sources of moral reasons. And at the end of the day, we are weighing reasons. That's what moral deliberation involves. And he could say, for instance, that it doesn't, when we are saying that we value our own kids, it doesn't mean that we have we are not valuing other people, or that we should think that in order for us to value our kids, we shouldn't value other people, or that in order for us to value our community, we shouldn't value other communities. He would just say there is a reason to value people, but there's extra reason that for us to be partial to the relations of partiality that constitute the good life for us. That morality is irreducibly personal, and that to view things from a moral perspective is not to view them from an impartial perspective, but it is to view them from the perspective of a human being.
Yeah, sounds good. I like the sound of it. Yeah, it's like having an in-group preference. Quite like that term, having an in-group preference. I wouldn't even go so far as to have to dignify it by saying, oh, I also do think other people in the world have humanity that needs to be respected. Yeah, of course. And I'm not even going to bother with that. But yeah, having an in-group preference, i.e. valuing the life and comfort of your own children over those on the other side of the world who you haven't met and got no contact with. Yes, that's the way it's always been. That's the way it's always been. That's the way it will probably always be. But it's, globalists, socialists, people that want open borders, people that don't want family units, they don't want nation states, all of that. So yeah, any in-group preference is wrong-headed and bad. It's amoral to them, So it's like we're all. What do they say? Things like we're all citizens of a global community.
Yes.
Therefore, some child that lives in Samoa or Bangladesh is just as important as your kid. That's insane. That's completely insane. No, everyone has an in-group preference, particularly, not just in their nation, but in their own family unit. to try and destroy that, to try and negate that, to try and it's truly evil to me. That
I agree with you.
use that word sparingly. I do use that word very carefully, but I think that's an evil thing to do.
I agree with you, and I think that it is important to point out something, that globalists are frequently base their claims on a universalistic morality. Now, I think that in a way, there is a universalistic tendency within the Western world. There is for instance, in Christianity, there is a universalistic tendency that says that all human beings are created in the image of God. Some parts of Christianity, I don't think, I'm not an expert. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But it seems to me that there is a universalistic element there. But on the other hand, there is another way of thinking about it, that we are asked by globalists, in a sense, to love humanity. Now, it seems to me that this is, in a way, sophistical, because love is a partial emotion. So an impartial love is no love. And it seems to me that part of what makes life worth living is a relationship, standing in relationships of love, of all sorts. But love is in a way exclusionary.
Yes, by definition, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So, and it doesn't mean, so for instance, when we have a couple that they love each other, it doesn't mean that they disrespect other people. It's just that they love each other and they have extra reason to be partial to each other. As you said, it's the group preference, and we could say that it's an association preference. What do you think of this?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, when you were talking about Christianity there, I think it's sort of fairly common amongst all sorts of religions that you are all, well, in Christianity it would be you are part of Christ's flock. You're one of his lambs. Doesn't matter whether you know it or not, you just are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sort of a fairly universal commonality with all religions, that whether you accept it into your heart or not, their God is the God, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, this idea that you have to love all of humanity, that we're all world citizens and we should all love each other. Well, is that how ISIS look at the world? Is that how the mullahs in Tehran look at the world? Look at women in their own country? Is that how they do it? No. There's lots and lots of cultures in the world that explicitly reject that, and will always do, as long as they stick to their guns. But we're supposed to accept that. Well, no, I won't. No, I'm not going to abandon my in-group preferences. I simply will not.
And I think it's important to stress the notion of love here, which is a sentiment, which is partial, because we are, in a sense, we are encountering people who, instead of saying we should completely ditch patriotism, they say that we should embrace a kind of political patriotism. And they are trying to somehow bring this impartialist perspective from the back door, let's say. And I think that it's important to stress that it's not an impartial thing. Again, they are making it about impartial love, which doesn't mean anything, because if you love your country, that should translate into particular dispositions. So, for instance, you feel a kind of sentimental reaction to the national anthem. Or you, as you say, you feel a kind of sentimental reaction when you watch your nation's flag. I think that all these are not captured by that kind of political patriotism. And it's an empty word for me.
It's interesting you talk about love, really, because patriotism is about love of your country. I mean, explicitly, really, your love of it. And yet, so to be asked to not love your own country, but also at the same time love other countries as much as you ever thought you loved your own country. It's just a weird gaslighting. It's just crazy anti-Western nonsense. It's just like, stop loving Britain.
It's a way to divide people.
Like Emily Thornberry, if you put a flag up in your window, there's something wrong with you. You are one step away from being a death camp guard or something. You're one step away from being a nationalist, which is one step away from being a fascist, which is being a monster. If you put a flag up, if you put the Union Jack outside your window during the Olympics or during the World Cup or something, there's something wrong-headed about that. At the same time, love all countries in the world, though, equally at the same time. You must have complete respect for Nigeria, whatever. Or like, it's just crazy. Ignore everything that you know deep down inside, and accept a one world order.
Yeah.
Even though other people in the world aren't going to do that. And it's crazy.
That is crazy. And I think that here is where there is a kind of cultural conceit, because we are not. It's a really weird thing when we talk about morality and how it applies to politics, because we are not living under ideal conditions, and very frequently, moral rhetoric is instrumentalized for political purposes. So we could say that there are vested interests that are putting money forward for, and they support a particular rhetoric without necessarily believing in it. It's because it's politically or economically expedient for them to do so at this time and place.
Mm.
It could change any moment.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.